Hi there, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for joining me. Today, we're going to be talking about how to shift the energy of your home from being low frequency or what we call too much of a yin energy, and how to shift it so that you're creating more of a healthy space for yourself and for your family, for well-being, and also how to create a sanctuary. So where you're creating an energy that really reflects and represents the type of energy that you want to be living in your life. And when you do that, it's amplifying your chakras and amplifying your energy in such a way that you are able to go out into the world and to manifest and to create that lifestyle, because your home is not competing or draining or taking energy away from yourself. So this particular talk, I'm going to be answering some questions a little bit later that you might have about your home. But I encourage you that if you have had a hard time lifting the energy of your home, it still feels very heavy to you. If you live in an apartment, if you are struggling with, even though you're energy aware, trying to get it to just the right recipe, then I encourage you to stay with me and ask some of the questions that you have that I think that some of the specialty situations will be able to address or answer for you today. Also, I'd welcome you if you have a particular area in your home that you really want us to focus on, or you have some questions about, then in the comments, if you will just write that particular room that you're really interested in and maybe your biggest challenge that you've had with it. So that way we can take a look and make sure we're on the same page and we address the questions that you have. So a couple of things that when people are working on shifting the energy of their home that you don't always think about is what your home is sitting on. And that's your bedrock, that's your geology. So if you are interested with crystal healing and you've brought that in for healing for yourself and also in different aspects of your life, you understand how important the energy of the earth can be and the crystalline structure and how much energy it can contribute to a space. And if you think about that, you just are sitting on top of a massive mineral or crystalline structure that is contributing in some way to the energy flow of your home. And that's going to be an important, depending on what you're sitting on top of, thing that you might need to address depending on what it is. So for example, let's talk about Sedona, because Sedona is really distinctive. We have these gorgeous, beautiful red rock monuments, and that's primarily made of limestone, but also it's got a tremendous amount of sandstone and iron in it. So that rust is really what's giving the red rock that very red color. And so the two things that are important is, one, limestone is really strongly associated with haunted locations and paranormal activity, so unexplained situations. The reason for that is that limestone has this amazing quality to be able to pull energy into it, to store it, kind of like a recorder or a battery, and then to replay it. So a lot of times you'll have a lot of residual type of hauntings and those types of things that occur on beds of limestone. Gettysburg, for example, has a lot of limestone places that have been built with foundations of limestone. Can have those particular types of qualities. Asheville, North Carolina, which has an interesting energy similar to Sedona as well, also has a lot of limestone. Brown Mountain Lights, paranormal activity unexplained so far by scientists. Lots and lots of interesting things are connected with limestone. So it's important that when you have a large composite of either limestone or quartz, because quartz has this very absorptive quality to it, that you make sure you recognize that or understand that in your solutions or your cures for the energy of your home, so that it's not just about what you are doing in the home and what kind of energy you're creating, but whatever was there before you is going to be radiating out, okay, from underneath or from around you if you have a lot of limestone. And so that's going to be something to take into consideration. Here in Sedona, one of the things that we have to take into consideration is that really large composite of rust and iron in the rocks means that there's a lot of shift energetically with the magnetic fields. So when things are happening from an astrology perspective, and when things are happening that the magnetic fields are shifting, if there's big solar flares, those types of things are being felt and experienced when you have a lot of iron ore in a little bit of a different way because you have that magnetic quality. So that's something to think about. If you're on top of basalt, which is really volcanic type of activity, creates really hard basalt. When you have that, that's a really strong type of grounding energy. It can be really uplifting, so it can be this wonderful benefit. It's going to give you a lot of extra charge, in particular for the root chakra, and helping to develop your connection, also increasing the ki energy that's available on that building site. So that's something that's really great or very beneficial to think about. Another thing I wanted to mention is granite. So granite is this kind of composite of all kinds of different stuff. We have quartz or little flecks of silica. You've got feldspar. So some other things, guys, that are from a healing crystal perspective that are feldspars would be moonstone and labradorite is an example. Sunstone is an example of feldspar. So they have this really cool, very high vibrational energy that they're contributing to a space. And usually you'll feel that with granite is that it likes to maintain a certain energy and a certain frequency. And so if you're not bringing a lot of consciousness to when you're living on fields of granite, or you just have a lot of granite in the space, it's going to be a little bit out of alignment for the energy below you. And it's going to kind of be pushing on you a bit, trying to get you to shift your energy or to change your patterns, if you will. So that's one thing too. Another thing that people should think about as well is your building materials. So let's think about if you go into an old cabin and you've got beautiful, gorgeous, big stone fireplaces, if you have like all these logs, even though it's empty and even if somebody has walked in there with a bunch of sage, you're going to kind of feel it, and you're not feeling the age necessarily just from the look. You're not necessarily getting that feedback just from your eyes, but it's also in the presence of these layers and layers of energy that are there, because logs, things that are natural, have this absorptive quality. And so that's something that is important to keep in mind or important to think about when you're looking at other building materials, things that are used a lot more these days. Then you're not getting quite as much of that absorption. So just regular drywall, for example, it will absorb, but not to the level that stone in a stone fireplace is going to, or big logs is going to. And so when you're walking around and doing cleansing, for example, you really need to have a focus on these areas that have a lot of extra natural elements where they're absorbing those energies, and having that tendency to go around with your sage, really focusing on the stones themselves, really focusing on the bricks, for example, if you have a lot of bricks or a lot of natural wood elements like beams, and intending that it also clear the emotional energy or anything that is low vibrational or something that's not supportive for your space. And not just that it might have experienced with you, but also what that area may have experienced before you, sometimes generations ahead of you. Okay, so keep that in mind. Another thing I wanted to talk about is about yin energy in a space, okay, because this is one of the most important things that people don't realize. So in a home, we, just like a human body, we've got energy lines and energy flow that's happening all around, and you need to have a balance of yang energy and yin energy, and that has to be maintained in the home as well. But yang energy is really important for healing, for physical health, for lifting your energy. If you're trying to do a lot of meditation or advance where you need a lot of energy moving through the system, so if you're doing intense Kundalini type of work, if you are doing intuitive development work, if you're trying to heal your body, you need an abundance of yang energy in order to be able to do that, so that is going to give the basis for your energetic system a whole lot of boost, so that your energy is not draining away over time. So that's something that's important. Yin energy, on the other hand, is softer. It's generally more equated with the divine feminine energy. It's a very receptive sort of flow. But yin energy is great for relaxation. It's great for going within. We have here in Sedona, we've got vortexes that are yin or yang vortexes. Yin vortex energies really help you to go within. It's great for helping you to let go, but it's not associated with boosting your physical health or really helping you significantly if you're trying to rise up the energy, moving from the base of the root chakra and moving all the way up to the crown. Now, it can help you and build a lot of insight, for example. You can use some of that energy. So we're not going to get into a whole lot of that. But in general, you want a lot of yang energy in your particular space as being the base, but also understanding that in your bedroom, for example, you don't want an excess of yin energy, but you want some yin energy, or you will never sleep. You will just sit there all the time like this, or have a very difficult time letting go. So it's a balance back and forth. But I'm going to help you understand a little bit more about places that have excess yin energy. I just was asked to come out to a home maybe a couple of months ago to get a feel for an area where somebody was having trouble clearing some energy. And ultimately what it came down to is an excess of yin energy being in the space. So I want to describe yin energy for you, because everybody's had this experience somewhere in their lives. If you ever went to grandma's house or somebody's house and the cellar door or the basement door is open in particular, and if you were young, for example, you might have had all kinds of theories about what was going on and why it just had this funky sort of feel to it. But generally dark and heavy kind of energy, feeling like it just is never seeing the light of day, for example. And you might have gotten closer and closer, and it gives you a sense of dis-ease or discomfort. That's a good example, just connecting with one area of what an excess of yin feels like. And yin can really build up based on different factors. It can have to do with how energy is flowing through your land on ley lines. So natural earth type of energy, similar to how we have chakras and meridians. You can have ley lines that are moving throughout your space, and some of them can be contributing more yang energy in a specific type of that. Some can bring in more yin energy. Those are important factors that can influence things too. You can also have a whole lot of yin energy if you live near a cemetery. That death energy is going to bring in and also the grief is going to reduce the energy frequency and give you a whole lot of yin there as well. By the way, just a reminder, if you're joining us, please type in the comments if you have a particular room or area that you would like to focus on, or a challenge that you have. Just put them in the comments and we'll try and get to those things too. And let's see, so additional yin has a tendency to attract like a lot of dust, where people just don't want to go into it. It has a really heavy feeling. It makes people feel a bit uncomfortable. If someone has passed away in that room, it's going to give a lot of yin energy. And that doesn't mean that that had to happen while you were there. or you are the owner of the home or the building, but if it did happen there, you're going to have an accumulation of yin energy that's going to have to be cleared. If there's an extended illness or sickness, for example, cancer can be one of those, or if people are coming home for hospice care, that can increase the yin energy in a space. So something that's a little bit more vulnerable might kind of tip the scales a bit and bring that in. Another thing too with yin is that people, I did want to mention this, is willow trees. Willow trees, guys, don't have a willow tree. I mean, they're lovely. They really are. They're beautiful. They're wonderful places to go to the park and to relax. But if you have a willow tree on your property, it is going to take that whole land energy and just really pull it down, because it's a very, very strong yin, particularly if it's a large or it's a big willow type tree or anything that's drooping. And then if you're on top of quartz or limestone, that's going to amplify that. So just keep that in mind. But anything that's subterranean, so basements, I kind of shudder at the thought that it's such a trend now for all these alternative homes, which I love. I've got all kinds of Pinterest stuff about alternative living, but subterranean homes, I never recommend, because it is going to be a very strong yin energy, and that is not good for health. Great for visiting, okay for a root cellar, not a good place for you to live. It's really going to affect your health in the long run, okay? So those are some interesting factors. So yin places also have a tendency to build up a lot of clutter. People have a tendency to store a lot of things there, or kind of the messy stuff ends up a bit in the yin room, or it just ends up a little bit more cluttered, which actually leads to more yin energy, because you have more like attracts like. So you've got this yin energy and clutter coming in, reinforcing the yin energy that is already there. And then it's heavier and you don't really want to go in there. And not too many people are really excited about going in and decluttering and so forth. So unless you're really enjoying the Marie Kondo show on Netflix now, if you know what I'm talking about. But most people don't. And so then that lack of occupancy in the space is also going to lead to a lot less activity, a lot less movement in the space as well, which increases your yin energy. So those are kind of areas that it's important to really zero in your home. What are the places that you don't like to go? What are the places you just don't feel comfortable in, or it just feels heavier for you? When you think about your patterns as you're walking through your home, what are the places that you do use the most and you like the most? So think about what is represented there. For some people, it's if this area has a lot more natural light, it's more comfortable, it's where they're maintaining more, maybe it's more decorated to their style, those types of things. Think about your patterns. Where are you not going? Where are you going? And try and consider that from the terms of yin and yang. And does some of the places that you're not going perhaps fit into some of the description that we were talking about earlier with too much of a yin energy? So a couple of things. I want to just start with how to shift places that are too stagnant. So yin is just stagnant, okay? It's just this, that's why it's so heavy, is because it's just kind of sitting there and it has all these layers and layers. It's not really getting a good cleanse one way or the other. It's usually not getting a whole lot of natural light or exposure to light too, and that has an effect. But some things that you can do to try and move that energy or shift it. And part of it depends on what the feng shui in your land is, what the feng shui in your home is, as far as what directions your home face. I like to think about, one, you always want to measure what's north, south, east, and west from your home. And then which direction does your front door face? The one that you're using all the time. What direction does that in particular face? Because that's going to have an important element of what kind of home that you're on. If you're in a north-facing home, for example, then that energy, if you think about the four winds from the Native American perspective, that home is going to want to be a healing space. It's going to want to be a sanctuary. It's going to want to help you to go very deeply within. It's going to want to help you to reflect and get quiet and to relax. It's also going to have a tendency towards more yin energy. And so any yin areas can be very amplified by that. So you have to consider that if you are in a north-facing home and you're trying to bring in extra yang energy, that you have to off-put or offset some of that influence. And then, of course, one of the challenges with having a north-facing is being able to see outside of yourself. That can be a little bit more difficult in that type of home environment. If you're in an east-facing direction, this is going to be the home of new beginnings and excitement, but your challenge is going to be more follow through. Okay. And then the same for just looking at the south, looking at the west, learning about, what those cardinal directions represent can be helpful as well. Some people really like to look at the numerology of a home. But taking all of these things into consideration, when it comes to how do you move certain things, again, we want to come into balance, but we do want to increase usually the yang energy. So a great example, let's talk about fire elements. Candles is a good way to increase yang energy. But nobody's around just kind of lighting candles like all the time in their home. You have to go to work. And so that's not always the best solution. Uplighting is going to be one area that it helps to increase. And this is where you want to do strong uplighting. You can see using lights like this, that counts as uplighting. And then you can just get like landscaping lights. Essentially, you can plug those little pots in. You can illuminate a plant or illuminate something that you want to increase. You can put it in a corner and just have the light move up. That's going to increase the yang in that area pretty significantly. It's also going to increase the fire element. So you just want to make sure if you're doing a feng shui plan that you're looking at exactly how that works. And you don't necessarily want to use a light or too much of a fire solution if you're in a water corner. That could be challenging for career. It can also be challenging for finances. So just some things to take a look at. Some other ideas is, speaking of water, moving water is a good one. So tabletop fountains that have a movement element other than just the water can be great. So they have, I think it's Woodstock Chimes has this really cool fountain. It's a bell fountain. And so the bells will actually move around and ding sound those elements. So if you have a really heavy space, that's something that you might bring in. Any areas where you place things, if you can put them in a corner, that's going to be your best impact or your highest impact for a room. Generally, not always the case, but generally, because that's going to travel in different directions. So it's also going to hold the space. So if you think about, we live in boxes for the most part, unless you live in a yurt, which is great. But usually we live in boxes, but energy doesn't flow like a box. It flows like this. So you end up over time with accumulation in the corners of a space where you have more of a vacant type of energy, and that's where things can build up, things can get heavier. And so when you place an item or a remedy in the corner, it's going to have much more of a powerful effect for the whole rest of the room and the whole rest of the space. So that's something that you need to remember if you are trying to minimize expense. You have your best impact there. Another thing is, make sure when you're staging and when you're clearing spaces that you pay big attention to the corners, because that's usually where you're going to have a lot of this buildup. One suggestion I have with is using sound. Tingshes is a really good example, and they're little handbells. They're used a lot in meditation, but they have a very reverberating sound. So, and when you're doing that, just waves. Oh, So good. When you said that, when you're doing that, that is going to help clean out some of the corners in a way that it just approaches it from a little different perspective than, say, sage or Palo Santo or something of that nature. Okay. Another thing that you can use is rose water. So rose water is great for just helping to lift energy, bring in a lot of heart energy, positive energy. But it's also something that when you have sacred statuary that people don't think about, you have to take care of and treat your sacred statuary. So these are Buddha statues, Ganesha, Kuan Yin statues, goddess statues, really any of those things that really are representing creator to you. You need to spend time caring for them. And one of the ways you can do that is spraying them. Like here's, I've got a really tiny little Ganesha here. It's just spraying that every now and then with some rose water. And then saying a gratitude prayer or something that is appreciative, that can be really helpful, and that's going to lift the energy in a space too. So keep that in mind while we're on the topic of statuary. So one of the things people don't think about is the positioning of your statues makes a big difference in the type of energy that they're representing. So generally you want a Buddha or statue that's sitting down or that's in a relaxed position, because that means that that energy is grounding, it's staying in your home, and that's what your intention is. If you purchase a standing Buddha, for example, or a standing statuary, then that's representing that energy leaving your space or getting ready to leave your space and go elsewhere. And so that's generally not what people want or want to represent. So consider those types of things when you are purchasing. So plants is another great chi builder. So it brings in a tremendous amount of yang energy. And so you got to take really good care of the plants, because if you're killing them, then you're going to bring in more yin energy. Okay, so you don't want to do that. That's going to be the opposite of what's happening. But when you have a nice, vibrant, healthy plant, it's going to create this aura of energy all around it that is healthy for your home. It's also healthy for you and increases the frequency and the vibration. It's also got a really nice vibrant color, and it can remind us to take care of ourselves in the same way that we're trying to take care of a plant too. So that's one thing to think about. If you love flowers, flowers can be a very joyful type of energy to bring in the space, but it's think about what type of flower you're bringing in and what it represents. So you might look up the symbolism of a sunflower or the symbolism of a rose. I think when you're in doubt, roses are always wonderful because it's very strongly linked with the heart chakra. Consider your colors, because you're going to be bringing in color vibration. So if you want something that is more of a cleansing, or you're trying to cleanse your space, white rose is the way to go. If you're wanting to bring a very gentle, peaceful, healing type of energy, then go with something that's pink or maybe a peachy sort of color. Peachy is going to give you more of an emotional connection or emotional feel. But you want to be sure that when the flowers start to wilt, that you throw them away. If you don't, you're going to end up again back with more yin energy in the space. So, and if you have a variety of flowers as well, like a really beautiful spring arrangement or something that's really beautiful for August, that's a lovely way to increase frequency. And it's also a nice way for you to just appreciate, smell the roses, right? So budget for flowers. So Reiki symbols, that can be something that's good. Mobiles. You can hang certain things. I've got some here in the office that represent some cures that I'm using, where it's hanging prisms to move light and shift light around. So I have hanging prisms up, but you can also use, they have these beautiful butterfly mobiles. Prayer flags is another thing that you can utilize. Anything that's really hanging, kinetic sculptures, if you have an area outside that you're wanting to create a special space for, that can add a whole lot of yang energy as well. And then you want to think about the airflow, because the kinetic sculpture isn't going to, or the kinetic element or hanging element is going to be impacted mostly if there's movement of air in the space. Otherwise, it's just sitting there. So fans, or just making sure that you're getting good airflow. I have some prayer flags in my house, actually, that are in a room. And the way that I've got it set up is so that when I open the window and the breeze comes through, it moves the energy for the prayer flags, and that sends really nice energy into the home and also out into the world. So keep in mind that it will only work if you're really focused on the airflow. If you don't have a window in the house, which, or in that particular area, which some people don't, and that's the area where, you know, might has that accumulation of yin, then set up some fans. Okay, that's a great way to do that. Or one of my favorites, of course, is really strong uplighting if you have a subterranean element. Natural light is always going to have a purifying effect. If you can or able to, you can put in lights or put in skylights, eco elements, those types of things, which bring in more of a natural light into the space, which is just purifying. Okay, but it can also, if you're trying to accumulate a lot of energy, you might want to buffer off. So in my healing space, I have a lot of natural, I set up the room so that I have a lot of natural light there, so that it helps to keep that area very clean, helps to keep it very dissipated, so that things that people are letting go is out of the space very quickly. But then I have my reading room that's set up that's a little bit more sheltered from the light energy, because it's building layers and layers of spirit energy that's there, that makes it easy for people to connect and easy for people to read, to receive a lot of healing. Now, I do a lot of sage and that sort of thing, but it doesn't dissipate those layers of energy that's built in. If it was exposed to light, then that makes it a little bit more of an obstacle. So you can, you have to, of course, every home is individual, or every space is individual. So that's something that you think about, where you want to accumulate energy, where you want to reduce energy, and consider where your curtains are, what your light flow is. Are there places you can add or just move light around? If you need to move light around from the purifying perspective, you can use mirrors, which bounce light around from one area to another, or use a little bit more reflective surfaces. If you're using mirrors, just keep in mind that mirrors are going to amplify whatever it's directed to or pointed towards. So don't have it where it's pointing towards like a big pile of laundry or something, something of that nature. If it's pointing into a yin space, you know, make sure that it's amplifying something that will have a yang energy in a yin space, and that will amplify that. Okay, so you're just moving energy or shifting things around. I love, for kids' rooms, rainbow generators. So kids are super sensitive, and they're very sensitive to energy that's happening in their room, and picking up on things. So it's important that their space be kept energetically clear, and they're not the best at putting all their toys away or that kind of thing. And so they might have a tendency towards a little bit more yin energy. So open the windows when you can, open the curtains so it can get light in and help to clean and dissipate. Salt lamps are amazing. They're great for kids. It helps to purify the energy in a space so that it's less likely to attract things that a very open child might be uncomfortable with. Okay, so it usually filters or kind of cleans some things for them and makes them feel a little bit more comfortable. If you've had a lot of illness in the home, or you have someone who is sick, then salt lamps is another thing that I recommend as trying to bring in, because it's going to, one, it can have some healing or beneficial effects for the person, but it's also going to help to clean and purify the energy of the home so that the whole home doesn't have to deal with all that heavy or hi Jennifer, or all of that yin energy as it kind of permeates everything. I'm going to read your question. Let's see. I have 2 empty lots on the other side of my, oh yeah. Okay, so I love your question, Jennifer. So If you have 2 empty lots beside you and then you have a dry riverbed, those are places where you definitely want to buffer a bit, because you're going to have all this yin that's going to be pulling in from all different directions. So you don't need to focus too much on the interior if you can get the exterior of your home set up. So using things like prayer flags or things that have the kinetic movement, you want to bring in a lot of yang around your space. So lots of elements like that. Kinetic sculptures can be good. Make sure that you're moving around the whole property regularly. Plants or doing a garden outside to kind of buffer. That's going to be something that I would think is very helpful. Bringing in bird feeders, okay? And you can really play with this. So you can do a whole like hummingbird garden and create lots of, I suggest more than one feeder, because you want to create kind of like a little sanctuary, inviting them in, because that's going to keep constant life force, constant movement in your space. Some people, if you're not a bird person, which who's not a bird person, but some people aren't, then you could do like bee boxes or bat rescue types of things that you put up. But you have to kind of think about your environment and what fits best, but bring in a lot of motion, activity, that kind of thing. Okay, so that would be my recommendation. So let me know if that helped, Jennifer, and if you have some other questions too. Okay. Let's see. Oh, crystal grids. Hi, Susan. Good to see you. Crystal grids is another way that if you are working with an earth corner or something like that, store your crystals there. You can add, yay, thanks, Jennifer. You can add a lot of activity by making a crystal grid where it's a component of energy just flowing, moving in constantly, and that's bringing your energy up and actually dissipating some of the ki outward or around. So that's another thing. You just want to, as with everything, when you're bringing in yang, you've got to give it attention. You have to give it love. So we don't want the plant to die, for example. So the same thing with the crystal grid. You just got to maintain it and get that energy moving pretty regularly. I think sacred geometry is a good thing that people can utilize too. So the flower of life is a good one. I personally really resonate with Metatron's cube. That's great. So I try and put that in different places. If you know Reiki, you can add Reiki symbols underneath your rugs. You can, when I built my office in North Carolina, I had the opportunity to build it from, studs and everything. So I wrote prayers into the wall. If you're going to paint something, you can add, prayers. If you are struggling with reinforcing the energy boundary of a door, you can add a prayer around the trim of the door. If you want to make it have a nice energy, for example, you can also like paint it maybe in gold and put a Sanskrit mantra there, something of that nature. You can add, if you're struggling again with boundaries in certain places, use statuary that has a protective kind of feel. So tigers, lions, your feng shui symbols of protection. Okay, that is great. And if you are having trouble with the energy in the front of your home, you don't want to put something outside. So say you live in an apartment, you can't put something outside, then where the entrance is, if it opens to a wall where it's the opposite, you can put a mirror there, which is going to bounce some of that energy back. But you can also put in a painting or a symbol of a protection statue. Okay, so that's an option too. You just have to get a little bit creative depending on where you are. Let's see. So any other questions or thoughts that are coming up? Things you want a little extra help with or feel like you need a little extra support? In the meantime, just add them to the comments. In the meantime, I also wanted to mention about color and color vibration. Color can either be energizing, it can be relaxing, it can be releasing. So you can look up color vibration and color psychology and take a look at that and see if it's reflecting what you're wanting to do. You don't want to bring in a yin color for a place that you're trying to introduce a whole lot of yang energy or something that just makes you feel unhealthy, you don't want to do that either. So you can look at color vibration. I love, there's some cards, if you're into oracle cards, called color intuition cards. And that has like different recipes of colors that are great for healing. And I think it's good to change your room and the layout of your space regularly, because if not, it has a tendency to get stagnant. It may not reflect where you are in the moment. You can change your decor also, but when you're going through a big change, let that be reflected in your home, so that way you're going, what am I wanting to focus on? What am I wanting to bring in? And think about what colors that represents. Think about what energy that represents and how you can create that in your space. So that's going to be one area. One of my favorite colors for calming is blue. A really favorite color for healing or a healing space is green. And you can go different levels of the spectrum. You can go darker, you can go lighter. Lighter is always going to bring in a little bit more of that purifying and light reflective properties. So if you're going dark, it's going to absorb light. So when you think about that, if you've got to yin space, go lighter. 100% go lighter on the spectrum if you're painting it, or go white. Either one of those options, but you want to try and bring in more light to that space. So, but if you are wanting, if you've got an area that has an excess of yang energy, then go a little bit darker with that particular shade. It'll absorb some of it. It will give you a little bit more of that balance or help you to relax. If you're finding that you're having, you're like this all the time in your mind and you're having a hard time with sleeping or with resting, then you want to probably adjust a little bit at the end. Fish tanks, don't put a fish tank or a fountain in the bedroom. Not a good idea. Too much yang energy. Sometimes plants can work, but maybe not a garden. Okay, so think about that. There's somebody at my apartments has one of those UV lights with all the different little plant pods, and it's in their bedroom. And I've really thought about mentioning to them about shifting it, but you know, everybody has a different frequency or a different idea, but we'll see. The last thing I really wanted to mention is how important it is to clean things and clean things regularly, especially those places that you just feel a little uncomfortable in. You don't want to go in. Those are going to be your yin accumulation spaces. So get in there, organize it, clean it. There's a concept in feng shui, which is the Chinese practice of balancing medicine, balancing energies with the earth and also in a home. Usually it's for something in particular or for the health of someone in particular. But with the feng shui aspect, one of the things that is really important is shar qi. So shar qi occurs, it's kind of like what they call the poison arrow, the negative energy. So that happens when you have this sharp corners. So if you have a sharp cornered coffee table, or where energy flows off the sharp corner of a bookcase, for example, or from like I've got speakers here, you need to have a remedy or something that kind of buffers that energy a bit. One of the biggest things that people don't consider is bookcases have tons of shar qi. Every single one of those books, in addition to usually the bookcase itself, has poison arrows. So so try this. If you are standing in front or near a bookcase, go in front of your bookcase, or go in front of a cluttered space with all these papers sitting around, and stand in front of it and see how you feel. Notice in your body, does it feel more anxious? Does it feel more stressed? Does it feel more relaxed? Usually it's kind of just getting a lot of feedback there. One of the ways to resolve that, if you've got built-ins that has a lot of books on it, you might consider adding some doors to that, or a screen. There's lots of different ways that you can just kind of buffer that energy a little bit. Anytime you put a door in, it eliminates the individual shar qi. So you can put your books in cabinets, those kind of things. But keep that in mind as well, because that's going to contribute to your health and how you feel. If you're confused about what you need to remedy in your space, other than what we were talking about earlier with the yin energies, just walk around. Where do you feel more stressed? When you just go stand in the corners too. Where do you feel heavier? Where do you feel denser? Where do you feel less uplifted and less inspired? And what can you do to change things? If you change how the furniture is, or if you change this, then go back to that space. How does it feel? Do you feel more inspired? Do you feel more uplifted? If you live in an apartment, or if you live in another area, and Jennifer, this is another option for you too, is putting crystals in the corners of the home. You can even bury crystals in your property lines, making a big crystal grid. If you want to just be simple and a little less expensive, you can put hematite in the four corners of where your property line is, and with the intention that that protect your space. And then you want to be sure, what are you protecting it from? Just so you're very clear with your crystals that you might be burying into the earth. But you can also add that into individual rooms where you're putting certain crystals into the corner. Like here I have, let's see, I have hematite, and then I have citrine and green calcite, and amethyst. So it's kind of lined up. The hematite's on the outside with the intention that the surrounding suites, or when people are walking by, their energy is not coming into my space. And then I add the other crystals in as a way to just increase the type of energy that I want in the space. So you can use whatever crystals you feel really inspired by. I think rose quartz is a great one. If there's a place where there's a lot of heaviness, you can bring in black tourmaline can be helpful. Underneath beds, if you have a child who's really struggling or having a hard time sleeping, or an adult, you're having a hard time sleeping, amethyst under the bed, you know, a nice large piece that's just maybe Reiki charged or just charged with prayer and positive energy, place that underneath. If it's small enough, you can do it under your mattress or underneath the pillow. If not, then you can put it underneath the bed. Just keep in mind, if you've got little kids, you don't want little jelly bean size crystals that they can choke on. Okay, so this is important. If you're trying to put stuff in the corners, you might instead need to bury it or something of that nature. Okay, so really shifting energy in a home can be one of those places that you can just go on and on and on and on about. But just to sum up some of the major points, identify yin areas in your home and in your space, and create resolutions for that by increasing the yang energy in the space. You do want a little bit of yin energy in the bedroom. It's a good idea to reduce shar qi, or to reduce areas where there's a lot of clutter. If you've got bookcases, covering those things up. Look at what your sitting direction is for your house. So where your front door is, which cardinal direction is the front door facing. That is going to tell you a lot about your house. If you can look at it from a feng shui perspective. I prefer in that case to actually look at it from the four winds, so more of a Native American perspective of what wind is that house going to be most influenced by. That's going to tell you what the gifts are of that home, what it can help you the most with, and maybe why you're attracted to it to begin with, but also what some of the challenges are and things that you might need to remedy or you might need to modify. And keep in mind that the yin energy is affected by the seasons too. So as we come into less light from the fall and moving into the winter, your yin energy, which is coming up from the earth also, is amplified. So now is the perfect time to go around your house and go, where's my yin stuff? Because you're going to feel it more now. Okay. In springtime, it'll lighten up a little bit. And that's sometimes why people don't do too much with their home, is like, they're like, oh, I'll get to it. Well, the springtime rolls around. They're like, oh, it's better. I don't know. Nothing happened. Just better. But it is great if you can just be very conscious in how you approach your home. It will really help your healing. You're not going to, waste energy with your chakras. Ultimately, your whole energetic system of your body is the chakras and the meridians that are flowing in between. Wherever you are in a home, for example, it's going to drain your energy if it's just too heavy, or if it's not in alignment with who you are energetically. And if it's too heavy, then you're the energy your body is bringing in has to fight to really convert it, to shift it into your chi. And when that happens, you're just going to be worn out more. You're going to be more tired. Meditations are a little bit harder, those types of things. So think about that. In the long run, you want a space that is helping you to achieve optimal health and helping you to be connected with the environment and the benefits of the environment, not just separated as well. So those are major elements to consider, things to think about. If you have questions, feel free to reach out. Christina at SedonaMedium.com. I've been doing house blessings and clearings. I've done work for businesses, those types of things for a long time. I really don't do it much anymore. It takes so long to do it. So I only do it just kind of volunteer, or if I'm helping someone that I know is really having a hard time. But it's something that you can learn if you'll just bring a lot of consciousness into it. And of course, if you have a conscious entity, that's an entirely different subject, and that does require a different type of cleansing or a different type of approach. But feel free to reach out if you have questions. You also find a lot of information on my blog at sedonamedium.com, or follow me on Facebook, and we'll be having some more chats with spirit coming up soon on a variety of different topics, just really connecting. So I look forward to connecting with you again, and thank you so much for joining me today. And I hope you have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week. So namaste. Bye-bye.